What you're about to hear is a story that unfolded not in the pages of a thriller, but in the sterile silence of a Santa Clara County courtroom and the cutthroat boardrooms of Silicon Valley. It's a story about a woman who was publicly erased, a wife who during a brutal divorce sat completely silent as her husband stripped her of everything they had built. He called her a simple homemaker, and the judge agreed. She walked out with nothing but her name. But what no one in that room knew was that her silence wasn't weakness. It was a strategy, and her name was the only asset she needed. Stay tuned to discover how Anna Vance went from a discarded wife to a billionaire CEO in less than a week. The air in courtroom 12 of the Santa Clara County Superior Court was stale heavy with the unspoken histories of fractured families. It was a cold, impersonal space, all polished wood and muted gray carpeting designed to drain the emotion from life-altering decisions. And on this Tuesday, September 2nd, 2025, it was the stage for the final act of the marriage between Daniel and Anna Sterling. Daniel Sterling sat at the respondents' table looking every bit the titan of industry he was. His suit was a custom-tailored Tom Ford, a dark charcoal that made his silvering temples look distinguished rather than old. He was the founder and CEO of Sterling Industries, a tech manufacturing giant whose components were in nearly every smartphone and electric vehicle on the planet. His lawyer, Marcus Thorne, was a mirror of his client's success, sharp, ruthless, and exuding an almost predatory confidence. They occasionally whispered to each other, a faint smirk playing on Daniel's lips. On the other side sat Anna. She wasn't Anna Sterling anymore, not in spirit. She was Anna Vance, the name she'd brought into the marriage 18 years ago. She wore a simple navy blue dress, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She was still a strikingly beautiful woman at 42, but she seemed to be actively trying to fade into the background. Her posture was perfect. Her hands rested calmly in her lap, but her gaze was fixed on a single insignificant scuff mark on the opposing table. Her lawyer, Sarah Hayes, was the picture of frustration. Sarah was a fighter known for getting her clients their due, but for weeks Anna had given her nothing to fight with. Ms. Vance Sarah had pleaded in their final meeting, "He's offering you a pittance." The house in Los Gatos, which he's claiming is a premarital asset because his parents gave him the down payment and a one-time payout of $500,000. After 18 years of marriage, of supporting his career, of raising your 2 children who are now in college, it's an insult. Anna had simply nodded. "I understand, Sarah." "No, you don't. We can argue your contributions. The late nights you spent helping him draft business plans, the concepts you gave him. There's no paper trail for that." Anna had said, her voice soft but firm. "They were conversations. Ideas on napkins. It's my word against his. Your word is worth something." But Anna had just shaken her head. "Not in this room. Let's just get it over with." Now in the courtroom that moment had arrived. Judge Miller, a woman with a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency, looked over her spectacles at the settlement agreement. "Mr. Thorne," the judge began, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet room, "walk me through the primary asset divisions." Marcus Thorne stood a shark, sensing blood. "Your Honor, it's quite straightforward. My client, Mr. Sterling, is the sole architect of Sterling Industries. The company was founded during the marriage, yes, but its valuation is a direct result of Mr. Sterling's singular genius and relentless effort. Mrs. Sterling, my apologies, Ms. Vance was a homemaker. A wonderful one, to be sure, who raised 2 excellent children. For her non-financial contributions, Mr. Sterling has graciously offered her the family home in Los Gatos, fully paid off, and a lump sum alimony payment of $500,000. He will also, of course, continue to cover all educational and living expenses for their children." Sarah Hayes stood her jaw tight. "Your Honor, we object to the characterization of my client's contributions as purely non-financial. Ms. Vance was an integral part of the genesis of Sterling Industries." Judge Miller looked at Anna. "Ms. Vance, Do you have anything to add to your counsel's statement? This was it. The moment for Anna to speak her truth, to fight for a share of the $4.8 billion empire she had helped build from the ground up. The room was silent. Sarah Hayes held her breath, giving her client a pleading look. Daniel watched a flicker of something. Was it anxiety in his eyes? Anna took a slow, deliberate breath. Her eyes moved from the scuff mark to the judge. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hang in the balance. Then she spoke, her voice clear and devoid of emotion. No, Your Honor, I have nothing to add. A collective exhale seemed to ripple through the room. Sarah Hayes's shoulders slumped in defeat. Marcus Thorne's thin smile widened. Daniel Sterling relaxed back into his chair, the picture of magnanimous victory. He had won. He had erased her from his history, rewriting it to feature only himself. Judge Miller, seeing no contest, stamped the documents with a percussive thud. The court accepts the settlement agreement as presented. The marriage between Daniel Sterling and Anna Vance is hereby dissolved. We are adjourned. The gavel fell. It was over. Daniel stood, buttoning his jacket. He gave Anna a brief, pitying glance, as one might look at a stray animal, before turning to leave with his lawyer, already discussing a celebratory dinner at the French Laundry. He didn't offer to shake her hand. He didn't say goodbye. Sarah Hayes began packing her briefcase, her movements sharp with anger. Anna, I don't understand. You just let him walk away with billions. He just painted you as a glorified nanny, and you said nothing. Anna finally stood, her composure uncracked. She looked at her lawyer, and for the first time that day a glimmer of something other than resignation appeared in her eyes. It wasn't sadness. It was something sharper, clearer. It was focus. Sarah, she said, her voice still quiet but now laced with steel. I didn't need the money. I just needed my name back. She picked up her simple leather handbag, turned, and walked out of the courtroom. She didn't look back. She left behind the life of Mrs. Sterling, the sprawling mansion, the social galas, the shared history. She walked out into the bright California sunshine with $500,000 a house and her maiden name. To Daniel, to the lawyers, to the world, she was a woman who had been utterly defeated, a fool who had quietly accepted her own erasure. They were all wrong. This wasn't an ending. It was a countdown, and the clock had just started ticking. To understand Anna's silence in that courtroom, you have to go back 18 years to a cramped Palo Alto apartment that always smelled of coffee and solder. Daniel was brilliant, no one could deny that. He had a Ph.D. in electrical engineering from Stanford, and a relentless ambition that burned like a furnace. But Daniel was a sprinter, not a marathon runner. He had explosive ideas that would fizzle out, lacking the foundational structure to become viable. Anna, with her dual degrees in physics and economics from MIT, was the opposite. She was the architect. She saw the entire system, the framework, the market viability, the long-term potential. When they met, she was working at a venture capital firm, analyzing the very kind of tech startups Daniel dreamed of launching. She saw the raw, unrefined genius in him, and he was captivated by her sharp, organized mind. Their courtship was a whirlwind of whiteboards and late-night brainstorming sessions. Sterling Industries wasn't born in a garage, as the company lore claimed. It was born on 1,000 dinner napkins in their tiny apartment. Daniel would pace, throwing out wild concepts for semiconductor efficiency. Anna, curled up on their worn-out sofa, would listen patiently before taking a pen and sketching out the supply chain, the patent strategy, the 3-year financial model. The core breakthrough that became the foundation of Sterling Industries, a novel method for layering silicon wafers that drastically reduced heat and increased processing speed, was Anna's. She'd been inspired by an article on biomimicry on the layered structure of butterfly wings. One night she'd sketched the concept on a placemat while they waited for pizza. Look, she'd said, her eyes alight with discovery. What if we stop thinking about stacking them like pancakes and start thinking about layering them like scales, interlocking with microchannels for heat dissipation? Daniel had stared at the drawing. At first he'd dismissed it. Too complex. The manufacturing would be a nightmare, but Anna had already thought of that. Not with plasma etching. If we modify the existing Crawford method. She talked for an hour straight. Daniel listened, his initial skepticism melting away into a dawning realization. This wasn't just an idea, it was a revolution. He took the placemat, and the next day he started working on a prototype in the university lab. He never mentioned her name. When he filed the initial patent, the inventor listed was Daniel Sterling. "It's just cleaner this way, honey," he'd explained when she gently questioned it. "I'm the face of the tech. You're the business brain. We're a team. The paperwork is just a formality." Young and in love, she believed him. For the first decade, they were that team. Daniel was the charismatic frontman, the Steve Jobs figure who dazzled investors and the press. Anna was the unseen force, the Tim Cook of the operation, managing strategy, logistics, and finance from their home office. She drafted the proposals that secured their Series A funding from Sequoia Capital. She negotiated the contracts with their first major clients. She raised their 2 children, Michael and Chloe, while running a multi-million-dollar company's back end from a laptop at the Kit Hayes table. Her name wasn't on the letterhead. She had no official title. She took no salary, pouring everything back into the company. It was all the family's, Daniel always said. Our shared future. The shift was gradual, insidious. As the company grew into a billion-dollar behemoth, Daniel's public persona began to merge with his private one. He started to believe his own press. He was the singular genius. The ideas he'd once brainstormed with Anna became anecdotes of his own solitary inspiration. The napkin sketch became a story of a vision he had in a dream. He began to patronize her. "Honey, leave the business to me. You've got the kids and the house to worry about." He hired a massive executive team populating the C-suite with people who only knew Anna as the boss's wife. Her strategic input was no longer sought. It was tolerated, then ignored. The final brutal cut came 3 years before the divorce. Anna had been working for months on a new project codenamed Ethelgard. It was a radical leap forward, a new type of biodegradable self-repairing circuitry based on mycelial networks. It was her magnum opus, a project that would make Sterling Industries a leader not just in speed, but in sustainability. It was the future. She presented the completed proposal to Daniel in his vast minimalist home office, the same office where she was no longer welcome without an appointment. He skimmed the 80-page document, his expression unreadable. "This is ambitious, Anna," he said, the word a dismissive pat on the head. "Very creative. But our shareholders want predictable profits, not some sci-fi experiment with mushrooms." "Daniel, this could change everything," she pleaded. "It's a whole new market. It's the right thing to do for the planet." He closed the binder and pushed it back across the desk. "I'll take it under advisement. Now, if you don't mind, I have a call with the board. And by the way, Chloe has a gala on Friday. I need you to make sure my tux is back from the dry cleaners." Chloe was the final component of Anna's erasure. Chloe Astor, the 20-something daughter of a New York real estate mogul, a fixture on the socialite scene with an Instagram following in the millions. Anna first saw them together in a picture from a charity event in Vanity Fair. Daniel's arm was around Chloe's waist, his smile more genuine than any she'd seen directed at her in years. When she confronted him, he didn't even have the decency to lie. "Anna, we've grown apart. It happens. My life is, different now. I need someone who understands that world. The world I helped you build," she asked, her voice cracking. "Don't be dramatic," he'd scoffed. "You took care of the house. I built an empire. It's not the same thing." That was the moment the love died. It wasn't a quiet fading. It was a sudden, violent extinguishment. In its place, something cold and hard and clear took root. He had not just taken credit for her work. He had used it to build a pedestal from which he looked down on her. He had stolen her past and her present. She decided in that instant that he would not have her future. For the next 2 years, while the marriage crumbled around them, Anna played the part of the heartbroken, fading wife. But at night, after Daniel was asleep or away on business, She was in the guest house she had converted into a private lab. She took her Ethelgard proposal, the one he had dismissed, and began to work. She called in favors from old MIT professors, consulted with mycologists and materials scientists under strict NDAs, and bootstrapped the research with a personal investment account she'd started with a small inheritance from her grandmother years ago. She learned that Daniel's lawyers would use her lack of an official title or salary to argue she was owed nothing but standard alimony. She knew any claim she made about her contributions would be dismissed as the bitter rantings of a scorned wife. Proving her intellectual contributions to Sterling Industries would be a long, ugly, and likely fruitless battle. So she chose a different path. She would not fight for his past. She would build her own future. Her silence in court wasn't an admission of defeat. It was a strategic masterstroke. By accepting the insulting offer, she avoided a protracted, messy legal war that would have put her Ethelgard project under a microscope. Daniel, blinded by his arrogance, wanted a quick, clean victory. He wanted to humiliate her quietly and get her out of his life. Anna gave him exactly what he thought he wanted. She let him erase her from Sterling Industries. She let him cast her as the simple homemaker. Because while he was busy rewriting history, she was busy writing the future, and he had no idea that the sci-fi experiment with mushrooms he had casually dismissed was about to make his entire empire look like a relic from the Stone Age. The Los Gatos house was beautiful, a sprawling 6,000-square-foot Spanish-style villa, nestled in the hills with an infinity pool and a view that stretched to the shimmering skyline of San Jose. To Daniel, leaving it to Anna was a grand gesture of his generosity, a golden cage for the pretty bird he no longer wanted. He never imagined she would see it not as a home but as a headquarters. The day after the divorce was finalized, Anna didn't mourn. She went to work. The movers Daniel had sent to pack her things were redirected. Instead of boxes of memories, they were instructed to carefully move lab equipment out of the guest house and into the cavernous, climate-controlled 4-car garage. This was the nerve center of her secret life. For 2 years, this space had been her sanctuary and her crucible. While Daniel was being photographed on yachts with Chloe, Anna was hunched over a scanning electron microscope. While he was giving keynote speeches at Davos, she was running simulations on a supercomputer she had built herself from salvaged parts in liquid cooling rigs. Her partner in this clandestine venture was Dr. Eris Thorne, a retired eccentric genius who had been her favorite professor at MIT. Eris was a legend in materials science, a man who had turned down fortunes from corporations like Dow and 3M to pursue his own esoteric research. When Anna had first called him 2 years ago with her wild idea about mycelial circuitry, he hadn't laughed. He'd flown out to California the next day. "They're the planet's neural network." Anna, he'd set his eyes wide with excitement as he examined her initial prototypes. "Nature's perfect information superhighway. If we can harness it, control its growth into conductive pathways. It's not just biodegradable, it's generative, a circuit that can heal itself. It's the Holy Grail." The technology they developed was breathtaking in its elegance and complexity. They named it heliosynth. It wasn't just a circuit, it was a symbiotic organism. A thin, flexible substrate was seeded with a genetically engineered strain of mycelium. When exposed to light and a minimal electric current, the mycelium would grow, forming intricate, hyper-efficient conductive pathways. It was a perfect fusion of biology and electronics. The applications were revolutionary. Self-healing electronics. A crack in your phone screen. The mycelial network would simply regrow the connection in a matter of hours. E-waste elimination. When a device reached the end of its life, the substrate could be composted, leaving behind nothing but harmless organic matter. Unprecedented efficiency. The heliosynth circuits ran cooler and processed data faster than anything Sterling Industries could produce, all while consuming a fraction of the power. It was a world-changing technology incubated in secret, while the world watched Daniel Sterling preen on the cover of Forbes. Anna had financed it all with the $2 million she'd carefully guarded in her personal investment account. She'd liquidated every stock, every bond. By the time of the divorce, she was down to her last $50,000, a terrifying gamble that hinged on her silence in court. The $500,000 settlement wasn't a consolation prize. It was her bridge funding, the final cash infusion she needed to take the next step. On Wednesday, September 3rd, the day after the divorce, her small hand-picked team assembled in the garage. There was Kenji, a young software prodigy who had dropped out of Caltech to work with her, and Dr. Lena Petrova, a biochemist Eris had poached from a rival lab. They were true believers working for deferred stock options and the chance to be part of something monumental. "The settlement is finalized," Anna announced, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. "Phase 1 is complete. We are solvent, we are independent, and our IP is secure." "Kenji, what's the status of the presentation?" Kenji spun around in his chair. "The simulation data is solid. The live demo prototype is stable. The deck is epic." "Lena, the mycelial strains are viable and reproducing at a rate 15% higher than our projections," Dr. Petrova reported, peering through a microscope. "The self-repair algorithm works flawlessly." Anna nodded, a surge of adrenaline cutting through her exhaustion. "Good." "Eris, what about the meeting?" Dr. Thorne, sitting on a stool and sipping tea from a beaker, smiled. "Julian Croft is confirmed. Friday, 10 a.m., his office." The name landed in the room with tangible weight. Julian Croft was not just any venture capitalist. He was the kingmaker of Sand Hill Road, the legendary head of Croft Ventures. He had been an early investor in Google, in Tesla, and Airbnb. Croft didn't just invest in companies, he anointed them. Getting a meeting with him was harder than getting into Harvard. Getting him to invest was like catching lightning in a bottle. "He only gave us 20 minutes, Eris added. He said, and I quote, 'I have no time for mushroom batteries, Eris. Don't waste my time.'" A nervous silence fell over the team. 20 minutes to pitch a technology that would redefine a trillion-dollar industry. "Then we won't waste a single second," Anna said, her voice a calm anchor in the storm of their anxiety. "For the next 48 hours, we live and breathe this pitch. We will be perfect." The next 2 days were a blur of relentless preparation. Anna didn't just want to present data. She wanted to tell a story. She knew Daniel's world intimately. She knew the language of investors, the metrics they craved, the blend of hubris and vision they responded to. But she would do it her way. She wouldn't wear the black turtleneck of a Jobs wannabe or the hoodie of a startup cliché. She would walk in as Anna Vance, the woman no one had ever really seen. On Thursday night, while her team ran final diagnostics, Anna took a rare moment for herself. She walked out to the patio overlooking the valley. The lights of the tech giants, including the gleaming monolithic tower of Sterling Industries, twinkled in the distance. For a moment, a wave of profound sadness washed over her for the lost years, the stolen credit, the man she had once loved. She allowed herself that moment of grief. Then she took a deep breath and let it go. He had taken her past, but in doing so, he had given her a priceless gift, a blank slate. He had underestimated her so completely that he had rendered her invisible. And in the world of high-stakes disruption, invisibility was the ultimate weapon. She looked at the lights of her husband's empire, his empire, built on her foundation. She felt no anger, no desire for revenge, just a cold, clear, unshakable certainty. "Tomorrow," she whispered to the night sky, "I lay my own foundation." The offices of Croft Ventures on Sand Hill Road were an exercise in understated power. No ostentatious logos, just a discreet brass plaque. The interior was a museum of modern art and Scandinavian furniture. It was a place designed to make even the most confident founders feel small a test before the test. Anna Vance walked in at 9:55 a.m. on Friday, September 5th. She wasn't flanked by a team of bankers and lawyers. She was alone, carrying a slim aluminum briefcase. She wore a simple, impeccably tailored gray suit. Her only adornment was a small silver pin in the shape of a branching network on her lapel. She projected an aura of serene, unshakable confidence. She was led to a glass-walled conference room overlooking a manicured Zen garden. Julian Croft was already there. He was in his late 60s with a mane of white hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to analyze everything with a terrifying speed. He didn't stand. He gestured to the chair opposite him. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice a gravelly baritone, "Eris Thorne speaks highly of you, which is the only reason you're here. I knew your ex-husband, Daniel Sterling. Brilliant man, cutthroat. You have 20 minutes to prove you're not just another bitter divorcee with a hobby." The insult was deliberate, a needle to test her composure. Anna didn't flinch. She simply placed the briefcase on the table, and met his gaze. "Mr. Croft," she began, her voice calm and measured. "In 18 years, Daniel and I had dinner together 6,570 times. At approximately 4,000 of those dinners, we discussed the future of semiconductor technology. So with all due respect, this is not a hobby. This is my life's work." Croft raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her directness. "Your life's work was Sterling Industries. I read the divorce settlement. You received no equity. The court deemed your contributions non-material." "The court was given incomplete information," Anna replied smoothly. "But I'm not here to talk about the past. I'm here to talk about the future." She opened the briefcase. It didn't contain a laptop. Instead, she took out two objects. The first was a standard smartphone, a top-of-the-line model from a leading brand. The second was a sheet of a translucent, flexible material that looked like a piece of high-tech parchment. It shimmered faintly under the light. "This," she said, tapping the phone, "is the pinnacle of Daniel Sterling's technology. Fast, powerful, and obsolete." She then placed the flexible sheet on the table. "And this is Ethelgard Energy's Prototype 0. It contains the heliosynth processor." Croft leaned forward, peering at the sheet. "It's a piece of plastic." "It's a living circuit," Anna corrected. She took a small, sharp tool from the case and deliberately sliced a deep gash across the surface of the heliosynth sheet. An audible hiss could be heard as several of the glowing pathways were severed. "And it's also the most powerful mobile processor ever created." She then turned on the smartphone. "This device has a benchmark score of 1/800 on the standard multi-core performance test. It's the fastest on the market." She then connected a small set of probes from the damaged heliosynth sheet to a monitor on the conference room wall. She ran the same benchmark test. The numbers on the screen began to climb at a dizzying speed, far surpassing the phone's score. It finally settled at a staggering 400 to 500. Croft's eyes widened slightly. 3 times faster. From a damaged prototype. "That's not the most interesting part," Anna said. She directed his attention to a magnified view of the gash on the monitor. As they watched, tiny, thread-like filaments of light began to grow from the severed ends of the circuits. Slowly, meticulously, they branched out, seeking each other, and reconnected. The benchmark score, which had dipped slightly, ticked back up to its maximum. "My God," Croft breathed. "Self-repairing, in real time. The mycelial network reroutes and rebuilds the damaged pathways," Anna explained. "The processor heals itself. Now imagine this in a data center, a military drone, a deep space satellite. The end of electronic failure. The end of planned obsolescence." She let the statement hang in the air. "And there's more," she continued, pressing her advantage. "What happens to this phone in 5 years? It ends up in a landfill in Ghana, leaching heavy metals into the soil. What happens to my processor?" She picked up a small sealed petri dish from her case. It contained rich, dark soil. "This was a prototype from 6 months ago. We seeded it in this soil. It decomposed completely in 90 days, leaving behind only water, carbon, and a few trace minerals. It's not just a better technology, Mr. Croft. It's an ethical one. It's the end of e-waste." Julian Croft was silent. He stared at the screen, then at the healing sheet of material on his table, then at Anna. He had built his fortune by identifying paradigm shifts before anyone else saw them coming. He recognized the signs. The raw audacity, the elegant solution to an impossible problem, the massive untapped market. This wasn't just an improvement. This was an extinction-level event for the entire existing electronics industry. "Who's on your team?" he asked, his tone shifting from skeptical to serious. "Dr. Eris Thorne leads our materials science division," Anna said. "Dr. Lena Petrova is our chief biochemist. Kenji Tanaka is our head of software architecture. We have a team of 12, all under strict NDA, all with equity, and your manufacturing plan already designed. It's a biofabrication process, more like a brewery than a traditional foundry. It's cheaper, cleaner, and infinitely scalable. We can build a fab for a tenth of what it costs Intel or Sterling to build one." She had an answer for everything: go-to-market strategy, patent fortifications, financial projections. She spoke for another 10 minutes, laying out not just an invention but a fully formed, battle-ready enterprise. When she finished, the 20 minutes were up. Croft leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen on the table. He looked at Anna, truly seeing her for the first time, not as Daniel Sterling's ex-wife, but as a force of nature in her own right. He saw the years of suppressed intellect, the meticulous planning, the unbreakable will. Daniel hadn't divorced a homemaker. He had unleashed a competitor he never knew he had. "Daniel's going to fight you," Croft stated. "He'll claim you stole his intellectual property." "Let him," Anna said, her voice turning to ice. "I have every notebook, every email, every dinner napkin from the last 18 years. If he wants to put our entire history on public record, I will be happy to oblige him. My name is on none of his patents, Mr. Croft. That was his greatest mistake. Legally, I am a clean slate." Croft smiled, a slow, predatory grin. It was the smile that had launched 1,000 unicorns. "Ms. Vance," he said, extending his hand across the table, "you didn't need 20 minutes. You had me at obsolete." He held her gaze. "Croft Ventures will lead your Series A. We'll need to discuss the valuation, of course, but I'm thinking something ambitious. How does a post-money valuation of $2 billion sound as a starting point?" Anna shook his hand. Her grip was firm. She didn't gasp or celebrate. She simply nodded, as if this outcome were the only one she had ever considered. "I believe," she said, a faint, confident smile gracing her lips. "That's a reasonable place to begin." She walked out of the office, leaving Julian Croft staring at the small, self-healing piece of the future on his conference table. The news wouldn't break for a few days after the lawyers had drawn up the term sheet. But the revolution had already begun. The news broke not like a ripple, but like a tsunami. On Tuesday, September 9th, exactly 1 week after the divorce, the Wall Street Journal dropped the bombshell with a headline that sent shockwaves from Silicon Valley to Wall Street. Mysterious startup Ethelgard Energy secures record-breaking $500 million Series A from Croft Ventures, valued at $2.5 billion. At the helm, Anna Vance, ex-wife of tech titan Daniel Sterling. The story was explosive. It had everything: a mystery CEO, a staggering valuation for a company no one had ever heard of, a link to one of the most powerful men in tech, and the delicious, dramatic twist of the divorce. The article was sparse on the details of the technology, mentioning only a revolutionary bioelectronic substrate. But the involvement of Julian Croft was all the validation the market needed. Daniel Sterling was in a board meeting at his gleaming headquarters when his chief communications officer burst into the room, phone in hand, his face pale. "Daniel, you need to see this." Daniel, annoyed at the interruption, waved him away. "I'm busy, Mark." "Sir, it's about Anna." The name silenced the room. Daniel snatched the phone. He read the headline. Then he read it again. The color drained from his face. It had to be a mistake. A typo. Anna Ethelgard Energy. He vaguely remembered her babbling about some project with that name. The one with the mushrooms. A $2.5 billion valuation. It was impossible. A joke. He scrolled down, his thumb shaking, and saw the photo accompanying the article. It was a new picture of Anna, professionally taken. She stood in a clean room environment, looking not at the camera but at a glowing wafer in her hand. She looked powerful, confident, visionary. It was a woman he didn't recognize. "Get Julian Croft on the phone." Now he roared, slamming the phone down on the table. His assistant scrambled, but came back moments later looking terrified. "Mr. Croft is unavailable, sir. His office says he's in an all-day planning session with Ms. Vance." The name Ms. Vance was like a slap in the face. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The market, smelling blood, reacted instantly. Sterling Industries stock, which had opened strong, began to slide. Then it began to plummet. Why? Because the narrative was irresistible and damning. The story wasn't just that a new competitor had emerged. It was that Daniel Sterling, the supposed visionary, had had the future of technology living under his own roof and had been too arrogant to see it. He hadn't just lost a wife. He had lost the next generation of his own industry. Every investor, every analyst, every journalist was asking the same question. What else did he miss? If he couldn't see the genius he was married to, how could he see the future of technology? His phone began to ring off the hook. Bloomberg, Forbes, CNBC. They all wanted a comment. His mistress Chloe called him, her voice a shrill panic. "Dommy, what is going on? My father just called me. People are saying your ex-wife is the new Elon Musk, the woman who used to arrange your sock drawer." The comparison was salt in the wound. He hung up on her. Enraged and humiliated, Daniel did what he always did. He went on the attack. He instructed his PR team to release a statement. It was a masterclass in hubris and self-destruction. Sterling Industries is aware of the sensationalist reports regarding Ms. Anna Vance. While we wish her well in her new endeavors, we feel it is our duty to inform the public and our shareholders that Ms. Vance has no formal background in technology development or corporate management. Any concepts she may be pursuing were likely absorbed during her 18 years of marriage to our visionary founder, Mr. Sterling. We will be investigating the intellectual property portfolio of Ethelgard Energy to ensure no proprietary information from Sterling Industries has been misappropriated. It was a thinly veiled threat and a public accusation of theft. It was also the biggest mistake of his life. In the temporary offices of Ethelgard Energy, a leased space in Palo Alto they had secured that morning, Anna and her team watched the statement go live on a large monitor. Kenji whistled. "He's not just digging a hole. He's hiring an industrial excavation team." Eris Thorne chuckled. "The arrogance. It's pathological." Anna remained calm. She turned to Sarah Hayes, her divorce lawyer, whom she had immediately retained as Ethelgard's corporate counsel. "Sarah, your thoughts?" Sarah, who was still reeling from the week's events, now looked at Anna with something approaching awe. "He's handed us a gift. He has publicly accused you of IP theft. That opens the door for us to respond with evidence to the contrary. He's just given you the public platform he denied you in court." Anna nodded. "My thoughts exactly. Prepare a press release. No emotion, no insults. Just the facts. State that Ethelgard's technology is entirely novel, developed independently, and that all patents were filed under my name, Anna Vance, after my legal separation. Add that we are confident in our legal position and look forward to focusing on bringing our transformative technology to market." It was a calm, professional, devastatingly effective response. It painted Daniel as a bully, a corporate giant trying to crush a smaller innovator, an innovator who just happened to be his ex-wife, whom he had publicly belittled. The narrative flipped. Anna became David, and Daniel was a very loud, very clumsy Goliath. That afternoon, Sterling Industries stock closed down 28%. Nearly $1.4 billion in market capitalization had been wiped out in a single day. The headlines were brutal. Sterling shock. Did Daniel Sterling divorce the golden goose? Daniel, locked in his office, was in a full-blown meltdown. He had been publicly humiliated. His reputation as a singular genius was in tatters. He looked at the stock ticker at the sea of red and felt a fury he had never known. He hadn't just been outmaneuvered, he had been made to look like a fool. And the woman responsible was the same one he had dismissed as a simple homemaker just 7 days earlier. The quiet woman who had said nothing in court. He finally understood. Her silence hadn't been her surrender. It had been the loading of the gun. The press release was the first shot. And he had a sinking, terrifying feeling that she had a great deal more ammunition. Daniel Sterling was a man who believed that any problem could be solved with overwhelming force. His response to the Ethelgard crisis was to unleash the full terrifying power of his legal team. He filed a massive lawsuit against Anna Vance and Ethelgard Energy, seeking a temporary injunction to halt their operations and claiming damages of $5 billion, the entire valuation of his company, and then some. The lawsuit's central claim was that the heliosynth technology was a direct derivative of research codenamed Project Chimera at Sterling Industries. It was a project Daniel had barely glanced at years ago, but his lawyers digging through the archives found it was the closest analog they had a failed attempt at creating organic circuitry. He was suing Anna for stealing an idea he himself had rejected. The legal battle became the most talked-about drama in the tech world. Daniel in his deposition was arrogant and condescending. Anna was my wife, not my colleague, he testified under oath. She had access to my office, my notes. Of course she overheard things. This entire company is built on a half-remembered version of my own discarded genius. His lawyer, Marcus Thorne, presented evidence that Anna had no patents to her name before the divorce, that her name appeared on no Sterling Industries documents. He painted her as a thief who had waited until the marriage was over to monetize stolen secrets. It was a compelling story. For a few weeks, public opinion began to waver. Maybe Daniel was right. Maybe she had played the long game, using the divorce to launch a company with his ideas. Then came Anna's deposition. It was held in a neutral conference room packed with lawyers. Daniel was present, sitting beside Marcus Thorne, watching her with a look of pure loathing. He expected her to be nervous, to crumble under the pressure. Anna walked in, followed by Sarah Hayes. She was, as always, the picture of calm. She took her seat, was sworn in, and waited. Marcus Thorne began the questioning. Ms. Vance, can you tell the court what your official title was at Sterling Industries? I had no official title, Anna answered. And your salary? I did not draw a salary, so you had no formal role. Yet now you claim to be the inventor of a technology vastly more complex than anything Sterling Industries has produced. How do you explain that? Anna looked directly at Marcus, but her words were aimed at Daniel. I am not the inventor of a single technology. I am the inventor of two. The first was the foundational patent for layered silicon wafer architecture, which became the cornerstone of Sterling Industries. A murmur went through the room. Daniel stiffened. Thorne scoffed. A baseless accusation. The patent for that technology lists one inventor, Daniel Sterling. That is correct, Anna said, and I never contested it. But a patent is not the same as a notebook. Sarah Hayes then placed a worn leather-bound journal on the table. We submit as evidence Exhibit A, Ms. Vance's personal research journal dated 2007. She opened it to a specific page. On it, in Anna's neat handwriting, was the original sketch of the layered wafer design. It was dated, annotated, and far more detailed than the initial patent filing. On the bottom of the page was a small coffee-stained note: Daniel thinks manufacturing is an issue, suggesting modified Crawford method. Thorne's face paled. This could be a forgery. Then perhaps you'd like to see Exhibit B. Sarah continued, producing another item. It was a digital audio file, a recording from the night Ms. Vance conceived of the idea. She played the file. It was a low-quality recording from an old microcassette recorder Anna had used to take notes. Her voice was audible, excitedly explaining the concept. Then Daniel's voice could be heard, skeptical at first, then slowly understanding. My God, Anna, you might be right. This could be it. Daniel shot to his feet. This is an illegal recording. It's inadmissible. It was recorded in our own home in a two-party consent state during a conversation to which you were a party, Sarah countered calmly. It is perfectly admissible, and it proves conclusively that the core IP of Sterling Industries originated with my client. The room was in shock. But Anna wasn't finished. "To answer your question, Mr. Thorne," she continued, her voice cutting through the tension, "I explained my ability to create heliosynth because creating revolutionary technology is what I have always done. The only difference is, this time I signed my own name to the patent." She then addressed the claim about Project Chimera. Sarah produced another piece of evidence, a formal 80-page proposal. "This is the original Ethelgard proposal which I presented to Mr. Sterling 3 years ago," Anna stated. At the front of the room on a large screen, Sarah displayed Daniel's emailed response to the proposal. The date stamp was clear. His words were projected for all to see, ambitious but not viable. "We're shelving this. Let's focus on predictable profits." It was a smoking gun. He had not only seen the idea but had formally rejected it in writing. His lawsuit wasn't just baseless, it was perjury. He had lied under oath claiming the idea was a derivative of his own work when he had documentary evidence that it was hers and that he had dismissed it. The unraveling was swift and brutal. The deposition was leaked to the press. The story was a Hollywood screenwriter's dream. The quiet wife hadn't just been the secret genius. She had the receipts to prove it. The narrative of Daniel as a wronged husband evaporated, replaced by the image of a perjuring thief who had built his empire on his wife's intellect and then tried to sue her when she finally claimed her own genius. The board of Sterling Industries convened an emergency meeting. Faced with shareholder lawsuits, a federal investigation into securities fraud for misleading investors, and a CEO who had committed perjury, they had no choice. 2 days later, Daniel Sterling was fired from the company he had founded. He was forced to resign in disgrace, stripped of his CEO title and his seat on the board. The news hit the wire, and what was left of Sterling's stock value evaporated. The lawsuit against Ethelgard was dropped. Daniel, facing his own legal battles and public ruin, was a broken man. His mistress, Chloe, seeing her ticket to power and prestige go up in flames, left him within the week. He was forced to sell his mansions, his art collection, his private jet, just to pay his lawyers. He had started the week as a king convinced of his invincibility. He ended it as a pariah, a cautionary tale whispered on Wall Street. He had lost his company, his fortune, and his legacy. He hadn't just been defeated, he had been erased. And the architect of his downfall had done it without raising her voice, driven not by revenge, but by the quiet, unstoppable force of truth. 1 year later, in the autumn of 2026, Anna Vance stood on a different kind of stage. It wasn't a courtroom or a boardroom, but the main stage of the TED conference in Vancouver. The room was filled with the brightest minds in the world. Scientists, artists, philanthropists, and thinkers. A massive screen behind her displayed the intricate glowing pathways of a heliosynth circuit, looking like a captured galaxy. Anna was no longer the invisible woman. She was the most famous CEO in the world. Ethelgard Energy, now valued at over $50 billion, after a wildly successful public offering, was a global phenomenon. Their technology was already being integrated into everything from medical devices to the next generation of electric vehicles. They had broken ground on 3 massive biofabs across the United States, creating thousands of jobs and pioneering a new model of sustainable manufacturing. She had become an icon, but not in the way of the tech bros who had preceded her. She wasn't known for volatile tweets or grandiose promises of colonizing Mars. She was known for her quiet competence, her fierce intellect, and her unwavering ethical compass. She spoke about conscious capitalism and the responsibility of technology to solve problems, not just create profits. "For decades we have operated under a false premise," she said to the captivated audience, her voice resonating with calm authority. "We believed that progress had to come at the cost of our planet, that innovation required exploitation, that a product's end of life was someone else's problem. We have been building our future on a foundation of disposable, toxic debt. Today we offer a different path." She spoke of a future where electronics were grown, not just manufactured, a future without e-waste, a future where technology worked in harmony with nature, not against it. It was a message of hope, backed by a proven revolutionary technology. When she finished, the standing ovation was thunderous and sustained. After the talk, as she walked through the bustling reception, she was approached by a young woman, a student from Stanford. Ms. Vance, the student said, her eyes shining with admiration. "I just wanted to say thank you. I was going to drop out of my engineering program. I was the only woman in most of my classes, and I didn't see a place for myself. Then I read your story. You made me believe my voice mattered." Anna smiled a genuine warm smile. This was the true measure of her success. Not the stock price, not the magazine covers, but this. "Your voice has always mattered," she told the young woman. "You just have to be willing to use it, even if you start by whispering to yourself in a garage." She never spoke publicly about Daniel. She didn't have to. The world had rendered its own verdict. His name had become synonymous with hubris and failure. The last she'd heard, he was living in a modest condo in Arizona facing a mountain of civil lawsuits. Sterling Industries, after a massive restructuring and rebranding, had been acquired by a competitor for pennies on the dollar, its innovations now rendered obsolete by the very technology its founder had dismissed. Later that evening, Anna stood on the balcony of her hotel room looking out at the lights of the city reflecting on the water. Her children Michael and Chloe were joining her for the weekend. They were immensely proud of her, their relationship stronger than ever, rebuilt on a foundation of honesty and her newfound visibility. She didn't feel triumph or the bitter satisfaction of revenge. She felt peace. She had not set out to destroy Daniel. She had only set out to build her own dream. His destruction was a consequence of his own actions, his inability to see beyond his own reflection. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from Julian Croft. It was a link to a news article. Ethelgard Energy had just been awarded a multi-billion-dollar contract to build the processing cores for NASA's new deep space exploration program. Anna looked up at the star-filled sky. She had spent half her life as a ghost, her brilliance confined to the shadows of another's ego. Now her name, Anna Vance, was quite literally reaching for the stars. Her silence in that cold courtroom a year ago seemed a lifetime away. She had learned the most powerful lesson of all. Sometimes the quietest voice can create the loudest revolution. You just have to choose the right moment to speak. Anna Vance's incredible story isn't just about a stunning corporate victory. It's a powerful testament to the hidden strength in all of us. It shows that being underestimated can be your greatest weapon. And that true power isn't about being the loudest person in the room, but about having the patience and brilliance to make your move when it counts the most. Her journey from a silent ex-wife to a global innovator reminds us that our value is never determined by someone else's opinion or a legal document, but by our own vision and resilience. What did you find most inspiring or shocking about Anna's story? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more true stories of incredible triumphs. Click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for listening.
What happens when you're at the lowest point of your life, sitting in a sterile conference room, about to sign away the last decade of your life? Your ex-husband is across the table, his arm draped around his new younger wife, who is busy admiring her Audemars Piguet watch. He smirks as you sign the papers, telling you that you're a relic destined to be stuck in the past. You walk out into the rain, utterly defeated. Then your phone rings. It's a lawyer from Sullivan and Cromwell requesting your immediate presence. You think it's a mistake, but you go. And that's when you discover that while your ex was showing off his new watch, you were about to inherit an empire. The air in the conference room at Rothwell and Finch was the color of weak tea and smelled of expensive, soulless carpet cleaner. Amelia Hayes felt like a ghost haunting the scene of her own demise. For the past 6 months, her life had been a slow, agonizing bleed. Today was the cauterization. Across the vast, polished expanse of the mahogany table sat Ethan Davenport, the man who had once promised her forever, and had instead delivered a meticulously itemized spreadsheet of their shared assets, heavily weighted in his favor. He wasn't alone. Clinging to his arm was Chloe, his upgrade. Chloe was a symphony in beige. Her cashmere sweater, her tailored trousers, her impossibly high heels, all in slightly different shades of cream and tan. A palette that screamed effortless wealth. Her blonde hair was so artfully highlighted, it looked like spun gold, and on her wrist a rose gold. Audemar's Piguet Royal Oak watch caught the dreary afternoon light. She wasn't looking at the legal documents. She was admiring the way the diamonds sparkled. Ethan, meanwhile, looked like he had been sculpted from the pages of a men's finance magazine. His Tom Ford suit fit him like a second skin, and he radiated the smug, unassailable confidence of a man who had just won. And he had. He had drained their joint accounts for a year to fund his secret life with Chloe, then used the best lawyers money could buy to ensure Amelia, with her university archivist's salary, would be crushed under the weight of legal fees if she dared to fight. "Can we expedite this?" Ethan asked, his voice a smooth baritone that Amelia now recognized as a performance. He gestured vaguely in her direction. "Some of us have a 2 o'clock tea time at Winged Foot." Amelia's lawyer, a kindly but outgunned public interest attorney named Sarah, cleared her throat. "We are simply waiting for Ms. Hayes to sign the final dissolution agreement, Mr. Davenport. As stipulated, Amelia waives all claims to future earnings and alimony in exchange for the remaining 6 months on her apartment lease and a one-time payment of $10,000. $10,000. It sounded like an insult, and it was meant to be. It was the cost of Chloe's handbag, which sat on the table like a pampered pet. For Amelia, it was the thin line between survival and destitution. Chloe let out a delicate, bored sigh. "Honestly, the things one has to sit through. It's all so archaic." She turned to Ethan, her voice a sugary whisper, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Darling, after your golf game, should we stop by the dealership? The new Porsche Taycan in chalk white is simply divine." Amelia's hand resting on the document trembled slightly. They had test-driven a sensible Subaru the year before he left, and he'd told her they couldn't afford it. The lies were so numerous, so layered, they had formed the very foundation of their last years together. Ethan leaned forward, fixing Amelia with a look of profound theatrical pity. "Just sign it, Ames. It's for the best. You can go back to your books, your dusty old manuscripts. It's where you belong." He lowered his voice, but the intent was for it to carry. "Let's face it, you were always more comfortable in the past. You're an archivist. You preserve things that are dead. It's what you do. You were never built for the future for this world." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. He had taken the one thing she was passionate about, her love for history, for the stories and legacies left behind, and twisted it into a pathetic weakness. He was framing his betrayal not as his failure, but as her destiny. Chloe added the final, devastating flourish. She glanced at Amelia's simple navy blue dress, a dress she'd owned for 5 years, and then down at her own diamond watch. "Some people are just vintage, I suppose, and not in a charming way." A hot, acidic rage clawed its way up Amelia's throat. She wanted to scream, to tell Chloe that her future was built on stolen money and a hollow man, to tell Ethan that he was a coward and a thief. But she knew it would only delight them. It would be the hysterical reaction they expected from the woman they had so thoroughly discarded. So she did the only thing she could. She picked up the heavy, gold-plated pen. She channeled all her pain, all her humiliation into the point of that nib. She looked at the signature line, her name typed beneath it. Amelia Hayes, no longer Davenport. The name had felt like a costume for a year. Now she was finally taking it off. With a steady hand that betrayed the storm inside her, she signed. The ink was black and final. She slid the document across the table. There, she said, her voice quiet but clear. It's done. Ethan's face split into a triumphant grin. He stood pulling Chloe up with him. He didn't bother to look at the paper. His lawyer would handle the details. Excellent. Sarah, expect the wire transfer within the hour. He paused and looked at Amelia one last time, the pity back in his eyes. Good luck, Ames. I really do hope you find your quiet little corner of the world. They swept out of the room, leaving behind the scent of Ethan's Creed Aventus cologne and Chloe's cloying floral perfume, a cloud of expensive condescension. Amelia sat there, hollowed out the $10,000 settlement, feeling like 30 pieces of silver. Sarah patted her shoulder. You were incredibly dignified in there, Amelia. Dignified. She felt like a historical document that had just been declared irrelevant and scheduled for incineration. She gathered her worn leather satchel and her coat. She was alone with 6 months to find a new place to live, a pittance to her name and a future that felt as grey and empty as the New York sky outside. Her phone, a 3-year-old model with a web of cracks across the screen, buzzed in her pocket. A blocked number, probably a spam call trying to sell her an extended car warranty she didn't have. She almost ignored it, but on a whim she answered, her voice a hoarse whisper. Hello, am I speaking with Miss... Amelia Hayes. The voice on the other end was deep formal and resonated with an old-world authority. It was the voice of someone who measured time in generations, not tea times. Yes, this is she. Ms. Hayes, my name is Alastair Finch. I am a senior partner at Sullivan & Cromwell. I am calling you on behalf of the estate of the late Mr. Silas Blackwood. It is a matter of the utmost urgency that I meet with you today. Could you be at our offices at 125 Broad Street within the hour? Amelia's mind short-circuited. Sullivan & Cromwell. That was one of the most powerful, prestigious law firms in the world. And Silas Blackwood, the name was a ghost from her childhood, her grandmother's estranged brother, a reclusive, almost mythical figure she had met exactly once at a family funeral when she was 10. He had been a tall, austere man with eyes that seemed to see right through you. He'd asked her what book she was reading, and when she'd shown him a history of the Romanovs, he'd simply nodded, said, "Legacy is a burden," and walked away. She hadn't seen or heard from him since. I think you have the wrong person," she stammered. "My great-uncle and I, we didn't know each other," Ms. Hayes, the voice said, with a tone of unshakable certainty. "I can assure you I do not have the wrong person. 1 hour. My assistant will meet you in the lobby." The line went dead. Amelia stared at her cracked phone, her heart starting to pound a strange new rhythm. Silas Blackwood, Sullivan & Cromwell. It was nonsensical, a bizarre cosmic prank on the worst day of her life. But then Ethan's final words echoed in her ears. "You were always more comfortable in the past." A tiny, unfamiliar spark ignited in the hollow space where her heart used to be. For the first time all day, it wasn't despair. It was a flicker of defiance. The taxi ride from the sterile midtown office of Rothwell and Finch to the imposing heart of the financial district felt like a journey across a chasm. Each click of the meter was a reminder of her precarious financial state, the $10,000 settlement shrinking with every block. Amelia watched the city blur past a rain-streaked canvas of grey and neon. She was operating on a strange, detached autopilot, driven by a force she couldn't name. It was the same instinct that made her, as an archivist, follow a faint trail of ink on a forgotten map, a curiosity that momentarily overrode the crushing weight of her reality. When the cab pulled up to 125 Broad Street, a gleaming tower of black glass and steel that seemed to pierce the low-hanging clouds, she felt a fresh wave of intimidation. This was the world Ethan aspired to, a world of titans who didn't need to flaunt their watches because they owned the companies that made the steel. She paid the driver the fare, making her wince, and stepped onto the rain-slicked pavement. Before she could even process where she was going, a woman in a razor-sharp charcoal suit stepped out from under the building's awning. Ms. Hayes. The woman asked her, smile polite but devoid of warmth. I'm Clara, Mr. Finch's executive assistant. He's expecting you. Clara led her through a lobby of soaring marble and hushed, purposeful silence. The air here was different, cool, filtered, and smelling faintly of power. They bypassed the main security desk and were escorted to a private elevator bank. Clara used a key card, and the elevator ascended with a silent, stomach-dropping swiftness. The doors opened directly into the reception area of Sullivan and Cromwell. It was less an office and more a baronial hall. The walls were panelled with dark, lustrous wood, hung with museum-quality paintings of maritime scenes. The quiet was absolute, broken only by the distant, rhythmic ticking of a massive grandfather clock. Mr. Finch is in the main conference room, Clara said, her heels making no sound on the plush, deep blue carpet. She led Amelia to a set of imposing double doors and opened one for her. The conference room was vast. One entire wall was a floor-to-ceiling window offering a breathtaking panoramic view of the New York Harbor and the Statue of Liberty. In the center of the room was a table that looked like it had been carved from a single gargantuan piece of obsidian. At the head of the table, silhouetted against the dramatic sky, stood a man who perfectly matched his surroundings. Alistair Finch was in his late 60s, with a mane of silver hair, a neatly trimmed beard, and piercing blue eyes. He wore a perfectly tailored three-piece suit of charcoal wool that made Ethan's designer clothes look like a cheap costume. Hayes, he said, his voice the same calm, authoritative baritone from the phone. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Please have a seat. He gestured to a single leather chair placed opposite him. It felt less like a seat and more like a witness stand. Amelia sat, placing her worn satchel on the floor beside her. It looked like a stray animal that had wandered into a palace. Mr. Finch, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I have to say again, I'm almost certain there's been a mistake. My great-uncle Silas disliked small talk, rarely attended family functions, and hadn't been seen in public since 1998. Mr. Finch finished for her, a flicker of a smile touching his lips. I know. I was his attorney, his confidant, and one of his very few friends for the last 40 years. And he spoke of you, Miss Hayes. Not often, but with a specific and notable interest. Amelia was stunned into silence. He knew you'd chosen a life in academia, Mr. Finch continued, his gaze steady and assessing. He knew you became an archivist. He once told me, Amelia preserves legacies. The rest of the world just consumes them. He admired that. He saw it as a sign of character, a quality he found to be in tragically short supply. He knew about my work. The thought was both baffling and strangely touching. A silent, invisible patron she never knew she had. Silas knew a great many things. Which brings us to the purpose of this meeting. His expression turned solemn. I'm afraid I am the bearer of sad news. Silas passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 days ago. He was 98 years old. His instructions upon his death were explicit and absolute. The first was to seal his estate from all outside inquiries. The second was to contact you. He reached for a thick leather-bound portfolio on the table and opened it. This is a certified copy of Silas Blackwood's final will and testament executed 6 months ago. Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. This was real. This was happening. A dizzying image of Ethan and Chloe at their golf club laughing flashed through her mind. Did he leave me something? She asked, her voice a whisper. A small keepsake. An old book. A few $1,000s would be a life-altering miracle right now. Mr. Finch didn't answer directly. Instead, he looked at her with an intensity that seemed to penetrate her very thoughts. Ms. Hayes, to understand Silas, you must understand his life's work. He was the founder and sole owner of Ethelred Global. Amelia vaguely recognized the name. It was a massive, privately held conglomerate, a shadowy giant in the worlds of energy logistics and technology. They were notoriously secretive, never appearing in the flashy business magazines. Their power was quiet, foundational, and immense. Ethelred is not a public company, Mr. Finch explained. As such, its value is not subject to market whims. However, a recent internal audit places the conservative net worth of its holdings at approximately $75 billion. The number hung in the air, so vast and abstract, it seemed to suck all the oxygen from the room. Amelia felt lightheaded. She gripped the arms of the chair to steady herself. Mr. Finch continued his tone, never wavering. Silas had no children. His other relatives are distant cousins to whom he has left modest but generous trusts. He believed that inherited wealth without purpose was a corrupting plague. He wanted his empire, his legacy, to be stewarded, not just spent. He wanted someone with a sense of history of duty, someone who understood that the past must be preserved to build a worthwhile future. He slid a single sheet of heavy cream-colored paper across the polished table. It was a handwritten letter. The script was spidery, but forceful. Amelia, it began. If you are reading this, my account is closed. Do not mourn me. 98 years is more than enough. I met you only once, but I never forgot the girl reading about fallen empires while the rest of the family gossiped. I have followed your career from a great distance. You chose a noble, quiet, and unprofitable profession. You chose legacy over currency. For that, you have earned my respect and now my burden. Amelia looked up from the letter, her eyes wide with disbelief. Burden read the rest, Mr. Finch urged gently. Ethelred Global is a powerful beast, and it is surrounded by jackals who would tear it apart for scraps. I am not giving you a treasure chest, my dear. I am giving you a throne and a kingdom full of courtiers and assassins. They will see you as weak, an anomaly. They will test you. Do not let them. Your skills as an archivist are more valuable than any MBA. You know how to find the truth buried in mountains of paper. You know how to spot a forgery. And you know the value of a story that has endured. This company is my story. Do not let them erase it. He had signed it simply, Silas. Tears pricked at Amelia's eyes. This man she barely knew had seen more in her, understood more about her than the man she had shared a life with. Mr. Finch let the weight of the letter settle before he delivered the final, earth-shattering statement. Miss Hayes, Amelia, Silas Blackwood has named you the sole beneficiary of his entire estate. You are the new owner of Ethelred Global and all its assets, real and intellectual. You have inherited his fortune, his company, his legacy, his burden. The world tilted on its axis. The view of the harbour outside seemed to rush towards her and then recede. It was a dream, a hallucination brought on by grief and stress. No, she whispered, shaking her head. That's impossible. I have $10,000 to my name and 6 months before I'm homeless. I catalogue 19th century correspondence for a living, and that Mr. Finch said, his voice softening with the first hint of warmth, is precisely why he chose you. But there is a condition, a crucible, as he called it. Of course. There was always a catch. Silas knew the board of directors would try to devour you. He did not want you to simply liquidate the assets and retire. The will stipulates that for you to inherit the estate unconditionally, you must assume the role of chairwoman of the board of Ethelred Global, and you must hold that position successfully, fending off all challenges for 1 full calendar year. He leaned forward, his expression intense. If you are forced out by a vote of no confidence, or if you resign before the year is up, the entirety of the estate, every dollar, every patent, every building, will be dissolved and donated to the Global Heritage Fund. You will be left with nothing. Chairwoman, board of directors. It was a foreign language from a hostile planet. The sheer terror of it was paralyzing. But then an image seared itself into her mind. Ethan's condescending smirk, Chloe's dismissive glance at her watch, and his final cutting words. You're an archivist. You preserve things that are dead. A cold, unfamiliar fire began to burn in her veins. Silas hadn't seen her as an expert in things that were dead. He'd seen her as a guardian of things that lived on. She looked Alistair Finch directly in the eye, the tears in her own drying on her cheeks. Her voice, when she spoke, no longer held the tremor of a victim. It was the quiet, steady voice of an archivist who had just been handed the most important document of her life. When do I start? The hours that followed were a surreal fugue state. Alistair Finch, with the calm efficiency of a man accustomed to rearranging the tectonic plates of power, guided Amelia through the immediate vortex. He explained the corporate structure of Ethelred Global, a sprawling labyrinthine entity with interests in everything from deep-sea logistics and satellite technology to sustainable agriculture and rare earth mineral rights. It was a silent empire, its influence felt everywhere, but its name spoken rarely. The board will be your primary challenge, Finch stated, his tone grim. They are led by the current CEO, Marcus Thorne. He was Silas's protege for 30 years. He is brilliant, ruthless, and he fully expected to be named the successor. He will not see you as the new owner. He will see you as an administrative error to be corrected. Amelia listened, absorbing the names and the stakes, her archivist's mind automatically creating a mental catalogue of threats and allies. Marcus Thorne went into a file marked hostile. Mr. Finch explained that a press release was a legal necessity. The news of Silas Blackwood's death was a secret known only to a handful of people, but it couldn't remain so. The announcement of his death, combined with the bombshell of his chosen heir, would send shockwaves through the financial world. You will become a public figure overnight, Amelia, he warned. Your life will be scrutinized. They will try to dig up anything they can to discredit you. From this moment on, your privacy is a memory. He arranged for a car to take her back to her apartment in Queens, not a taxi, but a black armor-plated Mercedes Maybach that moved through the city traffic with the silent, inexorable force of a shark. The driver, a stoic man named David, held the door for her as if she were a head of state. The ride was silent. Amelia stared out at the city, but she didn't see the familiar landmarks. She saw a chessboard, its pieces vast and terrifying, and she had just been placed in the position of the queen, vulnerable and all-powerful at once. When she arrived at her modest pre-war apartment building, the familiar comfort of its worn lobby felt alien. Inside her apartment, the silence was deafening. The ghosts of her life with Ethan were everywhere. The indentation in the sofa cushion where he always sat, the empty space on the bookshelf that used to hold his finance textbooks. For 10 years, this place had been a home. For the last 6 months, it had been a prison of memories. Now it was a museum exhibit of a life that no longer existed. She sat on her sofa, the one with the slightly frayed armrest, and pulled out Silas's handwritten letter. She read it again, and then a third time. Your skills as an archivist are more valuable than any MBE. You know how to find the truth buried in mountains of paper. It wasn't just a validation. It was a mission statement. He had given her not only his fortune, but the very lens through which to wield it. Her cracked iPhone buzzed. It was a text message from Ethan. Hey, hope you're okay. Sorry if Chloe came off a little strong. She's just excited about our future. LMK, you got the wire transfer. Drink sometime. For old time's sake. The condescension was a physical force pressing down on her. The offer of drinks was a final pat on the head, a gesture of magnanimity from the victor to the vanquished. He wanted to ensure she would fade away quietly. She didn't reply. She held her finger down on his contact, and with a sense of profound finality, deleted it. The next morning, the earthquake struck. As instructed by Mr. Finch, Amelia had put her old phone on silent. He had provided her with a new encrypted device, along with a laptop and a secure login to the Ethelred Global Archives, a digital treasure trove of the company's history. At precisely 9:01 a.m., the financial world convulsed. The press release from Sullivan and Cromwell went live. Silas Blackwood, founder of Ethelred Global Dead at 90. Estate names University archivist Amelia Hayes as sole beneficiary and new chairwoman. Amelia's old phone began to vibrate on the coffee table. It didn't just buzz, it danced, skittering across the wood like a panicked insect. The screen lit up with a cascading waterfall of notifications from news apps, social media, and a flood of calls from numbers she didn't recognize. The first call she answered on her new phone was from her mother in Ohio, her voice a frantic squeak of disbelief. "Amelia, is it true? The news? They're saying you... Oh my lord, they're saying billions. Is this some kind of terrible joke?" Amelia calmed her mother, promising to explain everything later. The second call was from her sister, a high school teacher in Chicago, who was just screaming with a mixture of shock and joyous laughter. Then a call came into her old phone from a number she still knew by heart. Ethan. She stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the decline button. But a different instinct took over, the same instinct that had made her accept Mr. Finch's challenge. She needed to hear it. She needed to archive this moment. She answered, but said nothing, listening to the static on the line. "Amelia. Amelia. Thank God. Are you seeing this? Is this real? It's on every terminal on the trading floor. Bloomberg, Reuters. They're calling you the archivist heiress. What the hell is going on?" His voice was a frantic, high-pitched mess, stripped of its usual smooth composure. "It's real." "Ethan," she said, her voice a calm, flat C, a beat of stunned silence, then the sound of a sharp, ragged breath. "Oh my God," he whispered. His tone shifted instantly, becoming slick, conspiratorial, urgent. Okay, listen to me. Amelia, you can't trust these people. These lawyers, these corporate sharks. They're going to try to take everything from you. You don't know this world, but I do. I can protect you. We can manage this. Together." The sheer, unmitigated audacity of it was a wonder to behold. Amelia repeated the single word, dripping with ice. "Yes, we... Think about it. I know finance. You have the position. We were a team. Amelia, don't you remember yesterday? Yesterday was a mistake. I was under a lot of pressure. Chloe, she doesn't understand our history. That settlement, the 10,000, it was just a formality. I was going to give you more, I swear." He was a frantic, pathetic liar, and for the first time she saw him not with the lingering pain of love, but with the cold, clear eye of a historian analyzing a failed leader. "You said I belong in the past, Ethan," she said, softly, twisting the knife he himself had forged. "You said I was a relic. Why would you want a relic as a partner? I didn't mean it like that. I was trying to motivate you. I always knew you had this potential in you, this hidden strength." He sputtered, his desperation palpable. She heard a shrill voice in the background, Chloe. "Ethan, who are you talking to? Is it her? What is going on? My mother just forwarded me an article from the Daily Mail." "Just a second, honey." Ethan hissed his hand, failing to muffle the sound. "Amelia, listen to me. We have to meet. Tonight. We can fix this. I can fix this. I'll get rid of Chloe. It was always you, Amelia. It was always you." The last vestige of her heartbreak, the lingering ghost of the love she'd had for him, evaporated in that moment, incinerated by the raw heat of his greed. He hadn't just betrayed her, he had never even known her. "Goodbye, Ethan," she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "No, wait, Amelia. Don't hang up. We can be powerful, more powerful than you can imagine." "Amelia," she ended the call. Immediately, he called back. She declined. He called again. She powered the old phone down for the last time. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside her building, a news van from Channel 4 was pulling up to the curb. A reporter was already setting up a camera. The siege had begun. Her old life was over. It had been signed away yesterday, but only now was it truly gone, burned away by the rising sun of her new reality. She was no longer Amelia Hayes, the jilted wife. She was Amelia Hayes, the chairwoman of Ethelred Global, and she had an empire to learn. The days that followed were a crucible. Amelia's quiet queen's apartment became a gilded prison, besieged by a relentless horde of reporters and paparazzi. Alistair Finch, anticipating this, orchestrated her extraction with the precision of a special forces operation. In the dead of night, she was moved into a sprawling, multi-floor residence at the top of the Time Warner Center at Columbus Circle, an anonymous fortress of glass and steel with its own private entrance and security detail. The residence was a world away from her book-filled apartment. It was a minimalist masterpiece of marble glass and muted tones, with panoramic views of Central Park that felt more like a simulation than reality. It was beautiful, sterile, and profoundly lonely. It was Silas Blackwood's New York home, a place he hadn't visited in a decade. Amelia's new life was a structured, 18-hour-a-day immersion course in being a billionaire. Her mornings were spent with tutors, a retired Wharton professor for finance, a former diplomat for corporate governance, a stone-faced woman who taught her security protocols. Her afternoons were spent with Alistair Finch, dissecting the complex anatomy of Ethelred Global. But her nights were her own, and in the quiet solitude of her glass tower, she did what she did best. She went to the archives. The company's digital archives were her sanctuary. For hours, she would read through decades of board meeting, minutes project proposals, internal memos, and most importantly, Silas's private correspondence. She began to see the company not as a corporate entity, but as a living history. She saw the audacious risks Silas took in the early days, the betrayals he suffered, the loyalties he cultivated. She saw his vision evolve from a hungry, ambitious enterprise to a global power with a deep, almost feudal sense of responsibility. In his letters, she saw his growing disillusionment with the modern world's obsession with short-term profit. They are dismantling the cathedrals to sell the stones, he wrote to a friend in one letter. And she saw the rise of Marcus Thorne, his name appearing again and again, first as a brilliant young analyst, then as a ruthless division head, and finally as the CEO, his memos growing increasingly focused on quarterly returns and shareholder value, a language Silas himself seemed to rarely use. She saw the slow, subtle shift in the company's soul. Her first board meeting was scheduled for the following week. Finch warned her it would be an ambush. "Marcus will try to make you look like a fool," he said during one of their sessions. "He will present something complex, something laced with jargon, and demand an immediate decision. He wants to prove to the board that you are an empty dress, a placeholder. Your first test is to not take the bait." The days leading up to the meeting were a blur of preparation. Amelia barely slept, her mind a whirlwind of financial terms and corporate bylaws. The public scrutiny was relentless. Ethan and Chloe had embarked on a full-scale media tour, casting themselves as the tragic, concerned loved ones. Page 6 of the New York Post ran a story with the headline, "Billionaire Heiress, Mentally Fragile, Fears Ex-Hubby." In the article, a source close to the couple claimed Ethan was worried the sudden wealth had caused a mental break, and that he was exploring his options to protect her from herself. It was a clear public threat, the first move in a campaign to declare her incompetent. The morning of the board meeting, Amelia stood before a full-length mirror. A stylist handpicked by Finch's office had assembled a wardrobe for her. It wasn't flashy, it was armor. A tailored dark grey Armani dress, low-heeled but formidable, Louboutin pumps, and her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. The woman in the mirror was a stranger, composed, formidable, and radiating a quiet power she didn't feel. When she walked into the Ethelred boardroom on the 80th floor of their Wall Street headquarters, the effect was immediate. The room, a glass-walled cage suspended above the city, fell silent. The 10 board members, a collection of grizzled industry veterans and sharp-suited financiers, stared at her as she entered. It was a unified, calculated display of intimidation. At the head of the table sat Marcus Thorne. He was in his late 50s, with a handsome patrician face, perfectly coiffed silver hair, and the cold, assessing eyes of a hawk. He didn't rise. He simply watched her approach, a faint, condescending smile playing on his lips. "Ms. Hayes," he said, his voice a low, rumbling purr of command. "Welcome to Ethelred. We were all so surprised to hear of your appointment." The word surprised was laced with venom. He meant appalled. Amelia walked to the empty chair at the opposite head of the table, Silas's chair. Mr. Finch took a seat slightly behind her, a silent, watchful presence. She placed her single, slim leather portfolio on the table, her hands steady, despite the frantic beating of her heart. She met Marcus Thorne's gaze directly. "Mr. Thorne, I'm sure it was a surprise, but here we are." Her calm, direct response seemed to momentarily throw him off. He had clearly expected a stammering, terrified librarian. He recovered quickly. "Indeed. Well, before we begin, I must speak for the entire board when I express our profound concern. Silas was a genius, but in his final years, his eccentricity was well documented. This, I'm afraid, seems to be his final and most damaging whim." A murmur of agreement went around the table. "Ethelred is not a university archive." Ms. Hayes Thorne continued, his voice dripping with condescension. "It's a multi-billion-dollar global entity navigating complex, volatile markets. It requires a lifetime of experience, not a passion for dead languages." It was the bait. He was trying to get a reaction to make her prove his point that she was an emotional amateur. Instead, she thought of Silas's letter. "You know how to spot a forgery." She opened her portfolio. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Thorne. I believe the first item on the agenda is your proposal for the acquisition of the Kestrel mining operation in the Democratic Republic of Congo." Thorne's smile widened. This was his chosen weapon. A complex, multi-layered deal involving a politically unstable region, labyrinthine mineral rights, and immense financial risk. It was the perfect trap. "That's correct," he said smoothly. "A $12 billion opportunity to corner the global cobalt market. A bold, decisive move that will guarantee our dominance for the next decade." He launched into a presentation filled with charts, projections, and impenetrable jargon. Amelia listened patiently. She didn't pretend to understand every financial nuance. But she had spent the last 2 nights in the archives, and she had searched for Kestrel. She found it mentioned in a series of memos from 15 years prior. And attached to those memos was a single scathing field report from a young geologist, a report that Thorne had clearly never read. When he finished his presentation, he looked at her expectantly. "So, Madam Chairwoman, do we have your approval to proceed?" All eyes were on her. This was the moment, her abdication or her coronation. "I have a question, Mr. Thorne." Amelia said, her voice quiet but carrying in the silent room. "About the geological stability of the Eastern Concession. The initial survey from 2010 noted significant seismic volatility and a high water table, making deep-bore mining prohibitively dangerous and expensive. Has something changed?" Thorne's confident expression faltered. He blinked, clearly blindsided. "That was a preliminary survey. Our new data shows." "I'm also curious about the political situation," Amelia continued, pressing her advantage. "I read that the current Minister of Mines, Jean-Pierre Mbata, is the nephew of the general who led the 2015 coup in that province. A coup, I might add, that resulted in the nationalization of all foreign assets for 2 years. Is it wise to invest $12 billion in a country where our ownership is dependent on the whims of a single notoriously corrupt family?" A wave of unease rippled around the table. These were risks the board members understood. Thorne had glossed over them, presenting the deal as a sure thing. Amelia delivered the final killing blow. But my biggest concern is this. She looked around the table. Silas Blackwood looked at this exact same deal 15 years ago. I found his notes on it in the archives last night. She paused for effect. He rejected it. His final comment on the proposal was a single sentence. Only a fool or a thief would build a palace on a fault line. The room was utterly silent. She had not used Thorne's language of profit and loss. She had used the language of the company's own history, the words of its founder as a weapon. She had shown them that she was not just the new chairwoman. She was the keeper of the company's memory, its conscience. Marcus Thorne's face was a mask of cold fury. He had been publicly humiliatingly outmaneuvered. Amelia looked at him, her expression unreadable. The Kestrel acquisition is denied. Now what is the next item on the agenda? She hadn't just survived, she had drawn first blood. The aftermath of the first board meeting was a quiet declaration of war. Marcus Thorne was too cunning to challenge Amelia directly again. Instead, he began a campaign of subtle sabotage, a death by 1,000 paper cuts. Crucial reports for meetings would arrive at her office minutes before they began, giving her no time for review. He instructed his division heads to overwhelm her with technical data, hoping to bury her in jargon. He became a master of passive aggression, praising her fresh perspective in meetings, while his allies on the board sighed and rolled their eyes. Simultaneously, the public war escalated. Ethan and Chloe were no longer just tabloid curiosities. They were professional victims. They hired a high-powered Hollywood publicist and began a carefully orchestrated media blitz. They gave a tearful primetime interview to Diane Sawyer, where Ethan, his face a mask of sorrow, spoke of the Amelia he once knew. She was this brilliant, gentle soul, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But this weight of responsibility, it's too much. I see her in these photos, and her eyes, they're like a stranger's. I'm not after the money. I just want the woman I love back from this corporate prison. Chloe, her hand resting on her barely perceptible baby bump, nodded sadly. We pray for her every night. The public narrative was insidious and effective. Amelia was painted as a cold, isolated figure, a tragic prisoner in a glass tower, while Ethan was the devoted ex-husband fighting to save her soul. It was a fairy tale in reverse, and the world was eating it up. The campaign was clearly designed to bolster their future legal claim that she was not mentally competent to manage her own affairs. Amelia felt the pressure closing in. The loneliness of her position was immense. She had no friends in this new world, only employees and adversaries. The board was a viper's nest of shifting allegiances, and Marcus Thorne was the serpent, charming them all. She knew she couldn't fight him on his terms. He was a master of corporate intrigue. She had to fight him on hers. Her only potential ally was a man she had only read about in the archives, Dr. Aris Thorne, Marcus's older, estranged cousin. Aris was the head of Ethelred's long-term research and development division, a semi-autonomous skunk works that Silas had funded personally. Aris was a brilliant, eccentric scientist, responsible for some of the company's most important patents, but he was openly disdainful of the corporate culture Marcus had created. Silas's notes described Aris as the only man here who still looks at the stars. Amelia scheduled a meeting with him, not in the sterile boardroom, but at his labs in upstate New York. The facility was a stark contrast to the Wall Street headquarters. It was a chaotic, sprawling campus of greenhouses, workshops, and labs, humming with quiet, focused energy. Dr. Aris Thorne was a man in his 60s, with a wild mane of grey hair, a rumpled lab coat, and eyes that sparkled with fierce intelligence. He greeted her not with a handshake, but by showing her a prototype for a new water purification system powered by solar energy. Marcus thinks this is a waste of money, Aris said, his voice a gravelly boom. There's no quarterly profit in giving clean water to poor villages. He'd rather we invent a new flavor of soda. Silas funded this division for a reason, Amelia said, looking at the complex device. Aris's sharp eyes appraised her. So, the archivist has been reading. Tell me, what do you really want? Ms. Hayes, you've survived your first encounter with my cousin. Impressive, but he's a patient predator. He's circling you right now, waiting for you to bleed. I want to win, Amelia said simply. I want to honor Silas's legacy, not the version of it Marcus has created. But I can't do it alone. Marcus has the board. He has the system. I have a history book. History is a weapon, my dear Aris said, with a wry smile, if you know where to look. Marcus has one great weakness. He believes he is smarter than everyone else. He has become arrogant, and arrogant men leave tracks. He led her to his office, a cluttered space overflowing with books and blueprints. He pulled out a dusty box from a closet. These are Silas's old project files from the 80s and 90s, the hard copies. He never fully trusted the digital archives. He said paper has a memory that circuits forget. Marcus has no idea these still exist. If he's been cutting corners, if he's been hiding his mistakes, the evidence will be in here. It will be your ammunition. Amelia spent the next week in that dusty office, her hands covered in paper dust, feeling more at home than she had in months. She cross-referenced the physical files with the digital records, and slowly, a pattern of deception began to emerge. Marcus Thorne had a history of burying projects that were his idea, but had failed, shifting the blame and the financial losses to other departments. More damningly, he had used shell corporations, a tactic she learned about from Silas's notes on his own early aggressive acquisitions, to purchase patents from struggling inventors and then sell them back to Ethelred at an immense markup. It was a sophisticated, long-running scheme of self-enrichment hidden beneath layers of corporate complexity. While she was gathering her ammunition against Marcus, she knew she had to deal with the public threat of Ethan. The constant media attacks were wearing on the board, making her look weak and unstable. She needed to end it. She instructed Alistair Finch to hire the most ruthless private investigation firm in the country. I want to know everything about Ethan and Chloe, she said. Where their money is coming from. Their real histories. I want the truth. The kind of truth that doesn't get printed in page 6. The report came back a week later. It was a slim, devastating document. Ethan, deep in debt from funding his lifestyle with Chloe, had been engaging in insider trading, using information from his firm to make illegal profits. Chloe, whose real name was Chelsea O'Malley, from Ohio, had a history of attaching herself to wealthy men. The Audemars Piguet watch was a gift from a married real estate mogul she was seeing before Ethan. And the pregnancy. The due date made it clear the baby couldn't possibly be Ethan's. The final piece of the puzzle was a series of wire transfers. A shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands had been making regular, large payments to Ethan. A shell corporation that Aris Thorne helped Amelia trace back to a slush fund controlled by Marcus Thorne himself. It all snapped into focus. Ethan wasn't just an opportunistic ex-husband. He was a paid operative. Marcus was financing Ethan's public smear campaign to provide air cover for his own eventual corporate coup. He was fighting a war on two fronts, and Amelia was the target. The cold rage that filled her was clarifying. They had all treated her like a character in a story they were writing. A tragic heiress, a fragile victim, an incompetent librarian. It was time for her to write her own ending. The perfect stage for the final act presented itself, the annual Met Gala. As a primary sponsor, Ethelred Global's table was a bastion of power, and Amelia knew her adversaries would be there. Marcus Thorne would be holding court, and he would certainly have arranged for Ethan and Chloe to attend a public display of their unholy alliance designed to humiliate her on the world stage. They expected her to be a fragile librarian, easily broken. They were about to meet the Empress. Amelia had spent the prior weeks gathering her ammunition. Dr. Aris Thorne had helped her unearth a paper trail of Marcus's 15-year scheme of embezzlement, using shell corporations to enrich himself at the company's expense. Simultaneously, the private investigators she'd hired had delivered a devastating file on Ethan and Chloe, detailing his insider trading and the sordid truth about Chloe's past, her fake pregnancy timeline, and the source of their funding, Marcus Thorne himself. The conspiracy was a neat, damning circle. On the night of the gala, Amelia transformed. She arrived in a gown of midnight blue velvet by Schiaparelli, severe and regal. Around her neck was the Blackwood diamond, a flawless 50-carat stone that radiated a cold blue fire. When she stepped onto the red carpet, the photographers, expecting a mousy archivist, were stunned into a frenzy. Inside, she found them exactly as she'd predicted, Marcus, Ethan, and Chloe, basking in the glow of feigned concern and real power. As she approached, a hush fell. Amelia Marcus boomed, projecting for the audience of onlookers. "So glad you came. Ethan and I were just discussing how worried we all are." Ethan stepped forward, his face a mask of sorrow. "Ames, you look tired. This is all too much for you." Amelia let the silence hang for a moment before she spoke, her voice cool and clear. "That's touching, Ethan, and I'm so glad to see you both looking so well. That must be quite a generous stipend Marcus is paying you from his Cayman Islands account, the same one he uses to launder the money he's been embezzling from Ethelred for 15 years. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Marcus's face turned to stone. Amelia didn't pause. "As for you, Ethan," she said, her voice dropping, but losing none of its edge, "the CCC will be contacting your firm in the morning. Your friend at the hedge fund has already agreed to cooperate regarding your little insider trading scheme." Finally, she turned to Chloe, who was pale with shock. "And Chelsea," she said, using her real name like a weapon, "I do hope your actual baby daddy is prepared to foot your bills. Ethan's accounts are about to be frozen. By the way, the Audemars Piguet is a fake. A good one, but a fake." She had not raised her voice. She had simply presented her research calmly and methodically, like an archivist presenting her findings. She turned and walked away, leaving a tableau of silent, stunned horror in her wake, their lives and lies utterly dismantled in the heart of New York society. At the top of the grand staircase, Alistair Finch was waiting. "Checkmate, I believe," he said softly. The fallout was immediate and absolute. The morning after the gala, a ruined Marcus Thorne offered his resignation at an emergency board meeting. Amelia refused it. "A resignation implies you have a choice, Marcus," she said, her voice cold steel. "You don't." The board voted unanimously for his termination for cause, and as security escorted him from the room, his corrupt era ended. Days later, Ethan was indicted by the SEC, his public persona shattered alongside his finances. The year that followed was one of profound transformation. Amelia didn't just run Ethelred Global, she curated it. She steered the corporate giant toward purpose-driven profit launching, the Silas Blackwood Foundation for Historical Preservation, and fully funding Dr. Aris Thorne's Clean Water Initiative. She proved that integrity was not a liability, but Ethelred's greatest asset, earning the deep respect of a once skeptical financial world. A year and a day after her life was upended, she stood in the newly dedicated Silas Blackwood Reading Room at the New York Public Library. "He would be so proud of you," Alistair Finch said quietly beside her. Amelia watched a young girl in a corner, completely absorbed in a history book, and understood her true inheritance. It was never the money, it was the strength she had discovered within herself. Ethan had called her an archivist of the dead, a relic stuck in the past. He was wrong. She was a guardian of legacy, using the wisdom of history to build an enduring future. Her work was just beginning. And so Amelia Hayes, the quiet archivist, became one of the most powerful people in the world. Her story is a powerful reminder that the skills we cultivate in the quiet moments of our lives, our passions, our knowledge, our integrity, can become our greatest weapons when we are tested. She didn't just get revenge, she redefined an entire empire, proving that true power isn't about being the loudest voice in the room, but the most prepared. What did you think of Amelia's epic takedown at the Met Gala? Was it the perfect revenge? And what do you think is the most important part of a person's legacy? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were inspired by Amelia's incredible journey from heartbreak to head of the board, please show your support by hitting that like button. It helps our channel bring more stories like this to you. And if you don't want to miss the next dramatic tale of vindication and triumph, be sure to smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Share this story with anyone who has ever been underestimated. Thank you for listening.